All right. So like I said in the last video, I'm starting with trademarks because they are the common denominator across many, many businesses. Every business has something that's trademarkable, a trademark brand asset, trademarkable brand asset, whether it's a product-based business, whether it's a service-based business, every business has something that can be trademarked, right? So this is where I'm going to start the IP masterclass on. I like to describe trademarks as brand identifiers, your brand identifiers. They are the things that your clients, your audience mention when they're trying to refer to you, right? So broadly speaking, we have your name, your brand name, and your logo. And there's something I like to use to illustrate brand identifiers. And that's simply when you meet somebody for the first time, you see their face and they tell you their name. And some people remember faces more. Someone like me, I recognize people's faces a lot more and I forget people's names, right? So it's one of those two. And the same applies for your brand, for your business. People can recognize your logo or they can say, oh, I've heard of that brand name before. So those are your identifiers, and broadly, those are the two identifiers. But as we progress, you'll see how each of these break down and then how you can begin to pinpoint different identifiers in your brand, even apart from your general brand name. So by way of definition, a trademark is a recognizable, distinguishable sign, design, or expression which identifies your business, products, or services to a particular source. So it identifies it to a particular source and distinguishes it from other businesses, brands, products, services in that same industry. People like to refer to trademarks as source identifiers, saying this is the logo identifies that this is where it's from, the brand name identifies that this is where it's coming from, right? So this is your definition. And from this definition, we can distill different forms of trademarks, different types of, I should say forms of trademarks, and how they can be used to identify different aspects of your business, of your products, of your services. The first form is word marks. So words, like I mentioned earlier, name. Word marks. An example is Cold Stone, right? So Cold Stone is a very good example for a word mark. Cadbury, that's another word mark. People recognize that name. It's a widely known name. So that name is something that obviously is trademarked. Logos. When you think of Nike, you think of the swoosh, the tick sign. That's a logo that identifies that this is a Nike product, right? You also have letters plus the logo. So a good example, when you think of Mr. Biggs, it has a big letter B, and then underneath the second part of the B, you have Mr. Biggs written in smaller case, smaller size font. So that's an example of letters and logo combined together. That's something that can be trademarked. Numerals can also be trademarked. So when I say numerals, I mean numbers. When you hear 737, you think GT Bank. And again, signatures, that's also something that can be trademarked. Popular signature that's already trademarked is Taylor Swift's signature. So Taylor and then Swift with a big line across the top for the T. So that's Taylor Swift's, very popular signature that's, trademarked already, right? So those are just, brief examples of what trademarks are and how they can be represented in your business, in your brand, right? And now looking to you and looking to your business, I'm going to do it in three ways. So product-based businesses, service-based businesses, and then if you have a personal brand as well, you can, with this exercise, be able to identify the different types of things in your business that can serve as trademarks, right? So let's start with product-based. A product-based business, of course, the business name should be trademarked. If there's a signature product that that business is known for, definitely please trademark that. A good indication is when people refer to you by the name of your product. It's like, launch legally, for instance. Oh, I know this girl, Bolaji, she does launch legally. That's something that's a product, but it's a name that's already been, that I'm being identified by. Right, so that's a name that's trademarkable. Apple is a good example as well. They have so many different products: Apple Watch, iPad, iPod, MacBook, iTunes, AirTag. Those are names of products that have been trademarked. So those are things that if you have such in your business, you can begin to think about to say, okay, this is something that I can trademark. Once it's becoming popular, once it's becoming known in the marketplace, you want to distinguish it and you want to trademark it, you want to secure it, you want to own that thing. For product-based businesses, again, I like to use Apple. Product features can be trademarked. The feature with iPhone where you can send an image from one phone to another, one iPhone to another, the airdrop feature, it's the name airdrop is trademarked, right? Slogans can also be trademarked. So if you have, your business has a slogan, it's something you can trademark. When you hear finger licking good, you know the brand that's identifying already. Okay, so that's product based. Now let's go to service based businesses. Of course, again, business name, this is why I said almost every business would have a trademarkable brand asset. So your name is your biggest, thing that you should think about trademarking first, unless, of course, you have something that you are being identified by other than your name. That's even almost overshadowing your business name, right? So if you have a business name, of course, for service-based businesses, trademark that first. If you have a signature service, trademark that. If you have a course name, trademark that. Very important to distinguish your course from that of other, people in your industry offering the same service. Service features. So if your service has a particular unique feature or a unique mechanism that you use to deliver that service, make sure you trademark that name. Otherwise, people in your industry will begin to provide that same service and name it with that same feature, and then you lose the exclusivity you have with coming up with that service feature name, right? And then slogans, of course, when you hear everywhere you go, you think of MTN, so that's an example of a slogan for a service. And other services also have several other slogans. A tagline can also be trademarked. And finally, personal brands. This is really, really, really something that can be overlooked if you don't pay attention to it. As a personal brand, like you are a popular individual, public figure, you want to protect the name that people refer to you with as a personal brand. Wizkid is a personal brand. He has a personal brand, I should say. So his name is trademarked. Adekunle Gold. His name is Adekunle, but we don't refer to him as Adekunle Gold. We call him AG baby. All those names, all those variations, things that people identify you or call you with, those are the names that you should be trademarking as someone that has a personal brand. Rihanna, she has so many different variations of her name. Rihanna, Riri, all those names are trademarked. If you have a catchphrase, now for your personal brand, like this is different from a slogan associated with a product or associated with a service. This is like a catchphrase that you've coined, something you've come up with over the course of doing your business or offering your service or doing what you do, even if you're an influencer, right? An example of a catchphrase is, it's Don Jazzy again. When you hear that catchphrase, you obviously automatically identify that with Don Jazzy. When you hear let's get ready to rumble, there's this very popular, I don't know if it's boxing or wrestling. I should actually confirm from my brothers. When we were growing up, they used to play this game a lot, and then just before the two fighters start, you hear that sound or that catchphrase come along. Let's get ready to rumble. And then I found out later on that that catchphrase was developed by somebody called Michael Buffer way back in 1982, right? He was working as a ring announcer, those people that announce when the fighters are coming or the boxers are coming onto the ring. And he began to say this, thing over and over again. And people began to recognize or identify that whenever this ring announcer is, announcing the boxers, this is what he says, right? So it got to a point, it became so popular that whenever they see him and he has called out their names and he's about to tell them to start fighting, everybody in the crowd is shouting, let's get ready to rumble. Of course, my guy got advised, he got a trademark, and since then he's been licensing the use of that phrase, that catchphrase, to people to use. And that's why in video games, they now are able to use that catchphrase And of course, he's benefiting from that. He's actually made a whole business out of that trademark. I hear now that the business is valued at about $400 million or so. So, this just points again to the importance of having a trademark, having it, securing it early, even though you may not see the value now. If it's something that you are building, it's not something that you are going to throw away in the next few years. Something that you're continually, exerting efforts and energy and resources, putting towards that business, putting towards that brand, then you should take the necessary steps to protect it as well. Okay, so generally, just to wrap up, your trademark can be your business name, it can be a product name, it can be a service name, it can be a course title, it can be a podcast name, it can be a blog name, it can be a signature drink. If you come up with a catchy name for your drink, right? You have a drinks menu, maybe you're a mixologist and you come up with a catchy name for your drink, something you can trademark, right? If you have a popular stage name, pen name, comic character name, those are things that can be trademarked. Fictional movie characters can also be trademarks. Barbie, that's very popular now with the Barbie movie coming out. Mickey Mouse, those are fictional movie character names that can be trademarked. Okay. So the categories of creative names that you can trademark, they're actually endless, right? Now, not every name that you come up with, like I said, not everything that you create, that's a creation of your mind, can be protected by IP. And for the purpose of trademarks, not every name that you come up with or use in your business can qualify to be protected by trademark law, right? And I'm going to break down, different types of names that can be trademarked and the names that cannot be trademarked, right? For a name to be trademarkable, we have to remember it must be something that's, that's unique, right? It must be something that's unique. That's a very, very key feature of something that can be trademarked. It shouldn't be something that's general, cannot be a general name, cannot be a name that people use every day. Because let me take a sip of water. When you trademark something, you're essentially saying, I want to be the only person that will have the right to use this name. So you can't take a name that's popularly used and say you want to own it exclusively. The trademark registry won't grant you that right? So it has to be something unique, right? But before I dive into all of that, I want to quickly draw a distinction between company registration, the name that you get when you register a company, and the name that you get when you trademark your brand, right? There's a distinction, and this is something that a lot of people mix up. I try to talk about it a lot in my content to say that your CSC name is not your brand name, right? And when I see businesses posting their CSC certificates saying, oh, I've secured my dream business name, I laugh because it's not your dream business name. You've only secured a corporate name, right? That's different from your brand name. And the fact that you have a CSC certificate with a name does not mean that another person in your industry cannot use that same name for their own business, right? So let's dive into all of that now. A company, when you register with CSC, it simply gives you, CSC registration gives you your corporate identity, right? Of course, again, if you're registering a company, which is what I do when I'm working with clients, when you register a company, it's a separate entity from you that's being registered, right? So the law is giving that separate entity its own identity, right? That's what that certificate is showing, that this is a separate entity. The name of this entity is ABC Company Limited. So that's what you get when you register a company. Your CS certificate is your company's birth certificate, if you want to put it that way, right? It's your company's birth certificate. That entity has its own identity, different from you, and it's a corporate identity. That corporate name is not your brand name. That corporate name is not your brand name, right? It's not the name that you promote for your business. It's not the name that you use to promote your services, your products, right? That's where a trademark comes in. When you have a trademark, when you want to trademark a name, you trademark the catchy, unique aspect of your name, the name that your audience call you by, the name that they refer to you by, the name that you identify you with. If we think of Apple, again, Apple Inc. is the full corporate name. INC is like the appellation that's used in the United States for companies, to identify companies. In Nigeria, it's LTD. That's the appellation that we use in Nigeria under Nigerian law. So Apple Inc. is the corporate name, but you don't see Apple Inc. everywhere, right? You see Apple, right? You see the apple fruit chopped in as the logo, right? That's the catchy, unique name that they've trademarked. So one company can have more than one trademark, can have several trademarks. And we've broken down how you can have several trademarks just a few minutes ago. So you can have one company, so one corporate identity, one corporate entity can have several trademarks, right? You can have several trademarks. So the fact that you've secured a corporate name does not mean that you've secured the name and nobody else can use it. You only get that right of exclusivity when you register the trademark, okay? I hope that's clear enough. So just to summarize, your CAC registration gets you your corporate identity, and your trademark registration gets you your brand identity and brand protection, right? Okay, so remember that I said not every identifier can be trademarked. Now let's conclude this session with looking at the names that can be trademarked, and then the names that cannot be trademarked. The first, I think there are 5 of them, right? And as I'm going through it, I want you to think of your business, your brand, your products, your services, and where they fall under this, on this spectrum of 5. I'm going to be going from the best type of names that can be trademarked to the ones that cannot be trademarked, right? And if you have a brand name that's maybe on the bottom part where it cannot be trademarked, we want to think about how you can modify the name and infuse some of the features that I'll be talking about from the top of this list to make it something that qualifies for trademark protection. Okay, so the first type of name that can be trademarked is fanciful names. And what do I mean when I say fanciful names? Fanciful names are essentially names or words that are invented, that are created. Again, that's the core of IP. It's something that's created. It doesn't naturally exist. It's invented, it's created. So a fanciful name is something that doesn't have a meaning in English language, doesn't have a meaning in language, right? You can't see the word and know that this is the meaning. It does not have a meaning. You just created that word. And the sole reason for creating that word is to serve as a brand identifier for your business, for your brand, for your product, for your service, right? So it could either be names that you create that has no meaning in language, or it could be names that have meaning, but like old, archaic words that nobody uses in common, conversation, common parlance, modern parlance today. So those are examples. That's the definition of a fanciful name, a name that doesn't necessarily have a meaning in language, or a name that doesn't have meaning in contemporary English language or contemporary language. Examples of that: Pepsi. Pepsi does not mean anything. It's just a name that was created. Kodak was just created. ExxonMobil. Exxon is just a name that's created. Does not have any. If you open up the dictionary, you're not going to find the meaning of Pepsi. So that's what it means when you say you have a fanciful brand name. And these are the best type of names that you can trademark. The best type of names to trademark are fanciful names. And if you have a fanciful name, then you're doing the right thing. Okay, so the second type of names here are arbitrary names. So these are real words, unlike fanciful names. Now, arbitrary names are actually words that have meaning in language, but the product or service or business that word is associated with does not correlate with the natural meaning of that word. So I'll give an example. Again, apple. When you hear apple, apple is a fruit, but apple, that name has now been associated with electronic products, phone, communication products, telecommunication company. They have technology products They have phones, they have iPads, they have different technological advancements, and that has absolutely nothing to do with the fruit apple. So if you have such a name that has meaning in language, but the meaning does not align with what you're providing, the product, the service, etc., then you're in a good place, right? If you go to the trademark registry and you want to trademark apple for a farm, an agricultural business, that's obviously not going to fly, because apple means fruit, and you cannot say nobody else should name their product apple because you want to be the first. It doesn't make sense, and it will not be approved. So the only way that names that have meaning can be approved for trademarks if the meaning is arbitrary in relation to the product that you are offering, the service that you're offering. I hope that's clear enough. The next one is suggestive names. So we're moving down the ladder now. Suggestive names is kind of like the middle portion. And if you have a suggestive name, you're still good enough for securing a trademark. Suggestive names, essentially, they're suggestive, they're indicative of the characteristic of the product or the service, but not just the plain word. So it's not just Apple, for instance, right? It's not just software, for instance. It's not just bank, for instance. When you hear the name, it's suggestive of what the product or service does, but it's not just the meaning, plain meaning of the name, right? There's still that slight indication to say, okay, this is what it means, but there's a distinctive part of it. So usually suggestive names have a section of the name that's indicative of the meaning, and then another section of the name that has nothing to do with that. You combine those together, and then you have a valid trademarkable name. A good example is Microsoft. When you hear Microsoft, you know that, okay, this is most likely a software company, but the name of the company is not just software, it's Microsoft. So they've combined micro and soft to come up with Microsoft. Citibank, Access Bank, those are names that you obviously hear it and you know, oh, this is a bank, but they have come up with other names to combine with that general meaning of the word bank to come up with a brand name that they can then take to the trademark registry to register as a trademark. Now we're getting to the names that cannot be trademarked. Descriptive names. These are names that you can't trademark a descriptive name. A descriptive name is something that simply, merely describes the business, describes the product, or describes the service. And you can't claim exclusive rights. You can't claim exclusive ownership of something that of a name that just describes your product or the name that just describes your service, right? I had a client who wanted to register a honey company. She creates honey, and the name of the product that she wanted to trademark was Oyin, right? So that's not English, but at the same time, it's honey. It means honey. And she was like, okay, what if we add something to it? You can't just, I was like, you need to add something to that. You can't just trademark Oyin. Like, for those of us that are not Yoruba, Oyin means like sweet honey, you know? And so we had to go back to the drawing table to come up with a different brand name. Oyin Adun was there, and I think that's what we eventually trademarked for her. So Oyin Adun, something like that. Or I think we added more elements to the name to distinguish it, to make it less descriptive and more suggestive. So taking it up the ladder, right? If you have a product that's a phone, you can't just name it phone. You know, iPhone is just one letter, but it was sufficient enough to distinguish it from just the generic name of the phone, iPhone. And then final rung of the ladder is generic names. You can't trademark a generic name. A generic name is just a name that everybody uses. Burger, phone, pen, just generic. You can't ascribe ownership of, you know, the name to yourself. Okay, I hope that, you know, explains everything about trademarks. I hope trademarks are a bit more, you know, clearer to you now. And that's all I have for you. This wraps it up for the trademark aspect of the IP masterclass. Of course, if you have any questions, please reach out to me maybe during our one-on-one sessions, or if you have a group clarity session coming up, you can note your questions down and ask them then, or you can drop the questions in the group and I would answer them for you timelessly. Okay, that concludes it for this section. I'll see you in the next one.